Hello and welcome DeFi Times community to yet another episode of This Week in Cosmos. And today is a special day because we do not only have Crypto Cito on the show, but also Greg Osuri. Greg Osuri is the CEO of Akash Network. Hey man, how are you doing? It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Absolutely great. Thanks for having me here.
Before we dive deeper into what the project does and what problems Akash Network tries to solve, it would be super awesome if you could give us a brief introduction to yourself. So how did you enter the crypto industry and what are you working on right now?
Oh boy. How did I enter crypto? So my name is Greg Osuri. I'm the CEO founder for Overclock Labs, the creator of Akash Network. And I been a programmer for a little over 25 years. I'm also an applied economist. So the last, I would say, 11 years or so, my focus has been primarily shipping and building developer tooling. I founded a company called Angel Hack to take hackathons to mainstream. And Angel Hack now, I believe, is about 150,000 developers in about 50 cities around the world. That's when I got incredible experience working with developers, especially under duress, and helped launch several companies. One of the companies at Angel Hack that was launched was Firebase. So Firebase got eventually acquired by Google. Really good friends with the founders still, and a lot of experience working with early stage tools like Firebase at Angel Hack. Gave me an insight and really wanted to focus on one critical problem back then, even till date, which is scaling your infrastructure. Like basically taking something you built and putting that on a cloud and scaling that in a frictionless way, right? So overwhelmingly, the situation was such that you could have a highly scalable solution, but that was very hard to use, or simple solutions like Heroku that was very hard to scale. So I wanted to find a middle ground where you can actually create scalable products without sacrificing user experience, right? So on that path, we began working on this new technology back then called Linux containers. This is 2013, before Docker came into existence. And they were fascinating because they could solve the parity problem where you could build something locally and ship that to a remote server and expect the behavior not to change, right? So that was very fascinating because it was just package here and open it there. I know now it looks all like easy and stuff, but back then deploying something was very not as easy as it is now, right? We take a lot of things for granted when you're using Akash Network, but a lot of these foundations were problems that were super hard to solve back in the day. So containers were very fascinating. Then came along a technology called Kubernetes. Kubernetes back in 2014, 2015 timeframe. Super early, no one heard about this. And I ended up like getting fascinated about this, made some contributions, wrote some libraries. I think Kubernetes folks still use today. And formed a company to take Kubernetes to market, right? So Kubernetes was one of those cluster fault tolerant / orchestration systems where you have a Docker container. Docker in itself is great, but it's not fully useful unless you figure out how to talk to other Docker containers and put this in a production environment where you have fault tolerance and all that stuff, right? So Kubernetes provided all that great stuff, and I created a company, Overclock Labs, to take Kubernetes to market. And one of the things that we did at Overclocks was to make any data center a fully functioning cloud provider, permissioned, of course, but within your own sort of like network. And you would have the same problem I was talking about. Like you could actually have highly scalable systems, but that are simple to use. We built this beautiful multi-cloud system that was leveraging Kubernetes and that was leveraging I specialize in multi-cloud inter data center type of hyperscale systems. And they would have this hyperscalability to it, which is fascinating. But the only problem we saw while we were deploying this solution was that the data centers we were going to would only be utilized maybe 15%, if you're lucky. Like maybe even 5% was like a common thing, but conservatively it was like 15% utilization. So 85% of the time they're not used. And it was such a dumb problem that, well, we were like, they have this, like, we built a solution for something that's it's not used very much, because you don't have peak loads all the time, and we wanted to build a marketplace. And so that's when the birth for Akash Network came about. So we were deploying the solution to a lot of customers, and it was sort of like obvious that this capacity needed to see the light, day of the light. And that's one side of the solution, right? One side of the equation, and the other side you have this like cloud, basically getting consolidated into four companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Alibaba, all creating effectively an oligopoly, right? And making it very hard for other cloud providers to come and provide services, effectively creating a moat. And that industry is growing at such a rapid pace. I believe it's going to be $1 trillion industry very, very soon. And so we were like, holy shit, like, okay, so you have this massive supply and you have this massive demand. There's no way to connect this supply to demand. And that's when the idea for a marketplace came about. And when we were designing marketplaces, we were like, well, how this is such an important critical piece infrastructure for humanity, and we wanted to make sure that we are not repeating the problems that were created by a previous generation. And the core tenets as open source developer for us was to keep a system that's self-sovereign and that's fully open source and permissionless in nature, right? Because we believe permissionless systems exhibited massive scalability mechanics, internet being a permissionless system. And we wanted to replicate that. And the only way to do that is for an infrastructure project is to stay fully open source, right? So a big challenge with open source software is you got to sustain, right? You got to have like, well, there's utility, but you need sustainability from an economic standpoint. And so from our technology, we already had like a solution, a BitTorrent style replication, because it's a centralized replication. And then we were using a Merkle tree style data integrity checks to achieve like immediate consistency. I don't want to get too much technical, but the problem, we kind of built like a quasi blockchain without realizing we were building a blockchain. When you put Merkle tree and BitTorrent together, you end up with a blockchain, right? And then it became obvious that we might as well bite the bullet and go blockchain. So 2016, we started like looking into blockchains, and 2017, we started prototyping. First we did in Ethereum. CryptoKitties launched. It was a disaster. Then we were like, well, we can't really use other people's blockchains. So then a library called Tendermint came about before Cosmos, and before Cosmos launched. And we were fascinating because it would let us build our own blockchain in a more formal way, more shared way. We were very excited about it because now we don't have to build the building blocks ourselves. And so that's how I got into blockchain and how Akash Network was created. And I think not very brief introduction about my background and whatnot. So
that's fine.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, that was a really in-depth 360 of your story and how Akash came together. But I think we can go a little bit deeper into some of those things that you mentioned. For example, what you briefly said was one thing that is probably one of the biggest challenges in the whole cloud industry is the massive centralization and dependencies that we have from those couple of competitors, right? AWS, Azure, and
Google,
others,
Alibaba.
right? Google
Yeah.
Cloud, right? And Alibaba, right? Those four. So can you maybe in a bit less technical terms, can you explain a little bit how the current cloud industry looks like, and also explain some terms, right? Like what does cloud computing actually mean in very simple terms? Because I guess most of our audience, they're not at all technical, right? They're probably more like crypto enthusiasts, right? They just entered the industry maybe recently. So this is probably a lot to wrap our heads around, also for me, to be honest, because I don't have a technical background, right? So can you explain in a bit simpler terms the current landscape of the cloud industry and what the main challenges with focus on the centralization and dependencies that we have from those four players?
Right. So I'll try to be brief and give you a little background as to how we ended up with the clusterfuck that is right now, right? So internet, when we began, internet was designed to be a decentralized system. The goal of the internet was, well, if you have critical infrastructure that was, it began with military, right? Obviously with DARPA doing research. The goal was like, well, so we have this critical infrastructure that's controlling our defenses, and you have Cold War and Russia is like being aggressor and whatnot. We wanted to create an infrastructure where there's no central point of failure, right? So the internet was supposed to be a peer-to-peer, and then what happened is, well, it was evolving as a peer-to-peer network, but then we ended up creating these choke points in the middle, right? No longer, it was just your home computer could serve a request because internet got so popular. Now we wanted like this big data centers. Data centers are essentially machines that are housing other machines in a fully dedicated, with cooling, with network, with security, and all the things you would need. Basically, it's a beefed up home laptop, right? That's what a data center is. It's just what it is. So it's so much more secure because, well, if you have a laptop at home with critical data, it could be compromised, right? And you can have thieves come and steal your data. So you probably want to give security. And if your data is being accessed a lot, you probably need a good network layer, right? So all these data centers are just nothing but fancy computers. That's what they are. Now, world over, well, companies were getting larger and the internet was getting more popular. People realized this isn't like in the 1990s, right? Amazon, companies like this that are building online businesses to have their own data centers, right? So they started building a lot of data centers. But the problem with data centers is, the problem with internet in general is you have peak capacity, peak loads. You don't normally have consistent loads, right? So like, Amazon, for example, Amazon.com, not Amazon Web Services.com, would have peak load during Christmas times, during Thanksgiving time, during holiday times where you have to shop, Father's Day, Mother's Day, that sort of thing. So if you have 100 computers, you have to, have enough computers to address the peak load, but most of the time you're like operating like 5%, 10%, because the load is very variable. So then Amazon really came up with the idea, well, look, we built all this infrastructure that we're not using a lot of time because they had a lot of unused capacity. They're like, well, and we figured out how to scale our systems. There's a fascinating story about how Jeff Bezos was like, how engineering at Amazon was focusing so much energy on like keeping their system scalable and running instead of actually focusing on core product. They're like, well, how about we start selling some of this compute to other people? So that's how Amazon came about, Amazon Web Services. And it became obvious and became like a sales value proposition for like, well, you don't have to own your computers. We'll own them for you. We will sort of like, charge you per hour when you use it on demand, right? It made sense because now you don't need like your capital expense. Now you just need to pay by the hour. It made sense in the short run, but eventually it ended up becoming a huge, completely different animal, which is a lot more expensive. I'll get to that in a second. So it's a good business model, but in that value proposition, Amazon was the first one. I mean, not the first one, but definitely the most popular one. Google actually was first before Amazon. They realized this, but Google didn't build a product that was appealing enough for customers to jump ship like Amazon did. And so other companies caught on, and that became like a thing. And Amazon's business model is no longer just selling compute. So when you're running an infrastructure, selling compute is one thing. You need these additional services that you use, like databases, like caching servers, like all these infrastructure elements, right, that you normally need to serve your application. Now these databases, for example, like a Postgres database, they're only like few things you need to do to maintain a Postgres database. Like you don't want to do it yourself. You want to pay someone else to do it because it's a common thing that doesn't need specialization, and it's maybe expensive for someone in your team to be fully dedicated managing a Postgres. So Amazon came along, said, "Oh, we'll manage your Postgres or your MySQL at a cost premium." They call it managed services. So Amazon will offer you cheap compute with an intention to sell your managed compute, managed services, and most of the revenue comes from managed services. So build this like competitive moat where they hold you on. You can't really change because now Amazon is managing your services, right? So one thing led to another. It's very similar to burgers and fries. You come for the burger. Burgers are cheap, but you stay for, and money's in the fries, right? The same thing like razors and like the blades, right? Well, razors are cheap, but blades are expensive. Same model, replicated. So the problem is like, so now you all use these services, then you're locked in because now they have your data, right? So it's just one thing after another. Amazon has about 250 services. That's their biggest revenue. I think they lose money on like compute, if I'm not wrong, right? And that's fine because they make so much money on the other thing, right? Like, so to answer your question, like cloud became just a simple computer essentially hosting data to data centers, and data centers became costly to run because they don't have utilization. And that led to cloud becoming the most powerful, like most profitable unit. I mean, Amazon Web Services alone is valued at $500 billion by Amazon. It is the most profitable unit for Amazon, right? So it's money making machine, right? And of course, the incentives are driven by money and nothing else, right? Like it's very very straightforward there. So now, so where Akash is coming and be like taking a unique angle Amazon can't play is, number one, we are fully open source. Right? I mean, that creates structural problems. Like you have censorship, you have like Amazon can shut anybody down if they want to, and they exercise that censorship recently with shutting down a lot of services they have misaligned political values from. So and the cost. I mean, if you talk to anybody using Amazon, they'll tell you how expensive. They don't even know what they're paying for. It's opaque billing. They create all these things on top of the core value proposition. So where we're coming from is like, well, we're going to data centers. We know there's a lot of unused capacity in data centers, right? Even Amazon's business model was that when they began. So we know there's a lot of unused capacity, and if we figure out a way to monetize unused capacity, now you eliminate the need for cloud itself or cloud service providers. I mean, not the cloud, right? So we're attacking the problem at a core. The core of the problem, which created Amazon Web Services, was unused capacity. Now, if we solve that problem, we don't need Amazon Web Services. Like, it's not going to be a single day or a single year journey. We have a long way to catch up. But hey, we started. We have growth. We have people using it, and that growth is amazing. We just saw we doubled the number of total workloads deployed on Akash in a month, right? And we are month 4. We still have 100% growth month over month at month 5, which is very fascinating. You normally see like 22% growth on like month 2, right? And that's considered great, right? But we have 100% growth. So it's very clear that the world is ready for a decentralized solution of Amazon. I mean, of course, Akash doesn't do everything Amazon does. It doesn't have 250 services that are managed, but we have one thing that's really well, which is compute. And after the compute, we're working on building higher level services in a decentralized way, where you don't have centralized point of control or failure. Did I go into like weeds, or I try to keep it high level?
That's fine. That's good. I think that was a very good overview. And I think Fabi, you have the next question.
Yeah, sure. So Akash, am I muted? Oh no. So Akash basically revolutionizes like the cloud computing market, as he explained. And for the listeners that are new to Akash and don't know anything about it, could you explain why we need to revolutionize like the cloud computing market in the first place? I know you touched on a few points already, but in that sense, could you also describe the vision of Akash and what you're trying to achieve?
Right. So there's inherent danger. So cloud arguably is the most important fabric. Internet, if you think about, is critical for our existence as a society. Cloud runs on the internet, right? So things are moving to the cloud, like it or not. So like it or not, you pay an Amazon bill. You pay an Amazon tax. Like if you watch Netflix, you pay Amazon tax. If you use Uber, you pay an Amazon tax. If you use anything, you are paying Amazon, invisibly as a consumer. So Amazon Web Services touches us in ways that you don't realize yet, every way, right? And what happens when you wield so much power to the few? Power has a normal tendency to get abused, right? It doesn't seem obvious in the first place, but historically, power always gets abused. And it tends to ruin industries, right? When you have a lot of power in few hands. Classic examples are, well, you have airlines. Do you like flying on an airplane? No. I mean, I don't. Well, if it's a private jet, sure. But like US domestic flight in America.
Yeah, not really.
They nickel and dime you for every little thing, right? Like every little thing. Why? Because it's an oligopoly. Oligopoly tends to, in a weird way, oligopoly tends to like, in short term, reduce prices, but they nickel and dime you on everything because there's only little value they can extract, right? They don't innovate. It's all about value extraction. It's not about value creation, right? Startups create value. Early stages create value because they really understand problems. Like, not like we stopped flying. Like same thing on telephones, right? Like cell services. Cell services are bad. The speed hasn't increased because you have few controlling the many, right? Oligopolies generally tend to create waste and tend to create industries that don't innovate. So if you're telling me, I mean, cloud is going into oligopolies and they stop innovating. No one, and that's very evident in experiences and cost, right? So as a developer today, the lack of innovation in the cloud translates to me in terms of how much effort I need to put in order to deploy something in a scalable way. Like if you go to Amazon.com, there's 16 ways to run a container, and if you try to deploy a simple thing like a WordPress blog, the experience is so bad that there's no set time how much it takes because it's so complicated, right? It's impossible, next to impossible for a developer to do anything productive without learning the entire stack, right? So, and then you have the cost, right? So cost is like, it's gotten to a point where Andreessen Horowitz wrote an incredible report on the state of things. It's got to a point where 20% of someone's revenues, if you're a company, goes to Amazon, right? 20%. So it's putting these people, like if you're machine learning, especially, right? If you're machine learning, you're such a disadvantage compared to your SaaS peers that you cannot let alone your first priority is not customer here. Your first priority is optimizing your cost, right? And that's bad. And third, more importantly, is censorship, right? So cloud today, they have censored. So if you try to run a Monero miner on Amazon, you can't. You can't run miners. You can't run. You can't run Pocket. Like there's so many other miners you just can't run. And on top of that, like if you have any different political value, right, that you must align with Amazon, they'll shut you down, right? Parler, I'm not supporting Parler here, but Parler is a classic case where a private company chose who has voice and who doesn't. That bothers me privately. That bothers me as a citizen of the world, right? I don't want a company, let alone a government, right? I don't want, have that much power to silence me. Like I may disagree with you, but I will always fight for the right for me to disagree with you, right? Censorship is bad. Censorship by the few is censorship by the many, right? And we are starting to see that crack. And another thing that really bothers me, a lot of things that bother me about the cloud, but another thing, really bothers me is what they do to open source infrastructure. They crush open source companies. Like I said, like Amazon's biggest moneymaker is services. And these services are not created by Amazon. These are open source services, by the way. And they take open source software, they offer hosting for open source software because somebody has to do it, and they charge a premium, and they steal the business model from these open source companies. Like there's a lawsuit, and there's a beautiful op-ed by New York Times that talked about all the anti-competitive practices of Amazon. And one of the big things they were doing was there's a lawsuit from Elastic Cache. Elasticsearch is like a search service that a lot of us use, but we don't know we use it because it's all invisible. If you go to like a lot of websites that have a search, that's rendered by this thing called Elasticsearch, right? Elastic Cache, their business model was provide hosting. They're fully open source software. They make money by providing your hosting services. And Amazon does the same thing. They take Elastic Cache, which is open source, created by this Elastic company, and they offer the same thing much cheaper than Elastic. And Jeff Bezos has this famous saying, "Your margin is my opportunity." Yeah, if you steal someone's product, you can go low margin. You're fine, right? So Amazon does so many evil things that power to them is given by us. So that's why it's important to take it back in a democratic, in a market first approach. And you cannot do that through regulation, right? Government is not here to save us, right? It has to be taken by a free market economy. So oligopolies are inherently bad, and we are seeing the cracks in cloud today.
Yeah, you mentioned very interesting points, and I have to admit there were some things I didn't know in the first place. And for me, the biggest takeaway from this is how crucial decentralization is, especially if we move towards a future with AI, with even more control. So I think that the infrastructure itself has to be decentralized. And to dive deeper here, because I think that's a very important point. So there's another distributed cloud platform. It is called Aleph.im, and Ubisoft just joined them as a core channel node. And very interesting was that I read in the report that Aleph.im pointed out that even though DeFi is decentralized, like from a validator point of view, that most applications or many cryptocurrencies that they partially run on centralized components in their infrastructure. You mentioned it with AWS, that it's sometimes not even possible to run a node, a Monero node on AWS. So what is your take on that? Like the decentralized finance industry aims to be decentralized, but from a perspective from the infrastructure, how decentralized is DeFi actually?
Yeah, good question. There's mounting evidence that most nodes on Ethereum are run on Amazon, and and you know, it's Jeff Bezos' prerogative at this point if he decides to keep them running, or if he doesn't want, he wants to shut down Ethereum network, gone. He can do that. So most people like in DeFi don't care the fact that infrastructure is centralized, but they all want to be decentralized. I think that's just, it's so bad, the cognitive dissonance that we have, right? On top of that, most DeFi projects will have, well, so let's assume like, oh, well, Jeff Bezos is not going to do that. He's a good guy, right? Like Ethereum is going to be decentralized on Amazon, right? That's fine. So then we have like our UI layers. UI layer is a web server. It has a domain name, right? That's centralized to begin with. So the domain name is hosted on a DNS server that's hosted on Amazon. And then you have your web server running on Amazon, right? Amazon can decide anytime that these guys are not okay. And more importantly, it's very risky for the creators. Like, for example, uniswap.org believes on Amazon or some centralized server, uh, going and essentially uh, register under Hayden Adams. So if regulators want to throw a hammer, there you are. Just remove the website, and where are you going to go, right? So I like what. So there's inherent problem. DeFi is not fully decentralized unless the entire stack, is on a decentralized network, right? It's gotten to so bad. Like even there are solutions like Skynet, which does like data, but it can do some static hosting, right? And there was a Uniswap on Skynet hosted, and they had to get a takedown request from like the Uniswap people, a DMCA request. Like even people that are trying to actually keep them decentralized are being fought by the DeFi projects themselves. So it's like, I think it's a bunch of, decentralization is essentially by a lot of these projects are whatever works for them in their narrative. But you ask the difficult questions, they don't answer, right? Now but it's not all black and white. Like I understand, like if you're a young project and if you want to really iterate, Akash or Skynet or any of these tools don't have all the comforts that centralized infrastructure provides you. Centralized infrastructure is still very comfortable. It's as it stands today. If you're not crypto native, you in it's probably easier to put your credit card and do it, right? But that argument of like, yeah, it's harder to use. Uh, really puts you into question, are you sacrificing comfort for progress? Right? Like, so I think uh and a lot of these people are not, and they don't understand. I mean, trust me, I spoke to so many of the DeFi projects, and people, the amount, I wish I could record some of this calls, but and really made you listen to the arguments people make. The first and the most common argument I hear is like, oh, it's fine. Amazon works. It does the job for us. if we don't think Amazon is going to act against our interest, like, and that's, I mean, I wish someone tells them like, oh, well, fine, like, banks work, we don't need DeFi to come and solve a problem. So it's same argument that I'm like, have you listened to yourself? I could make you listen to this recording yourself, right? Like, so people think Amazon won't go down, so that's why a lot of crypto exchanges go down. The reason is because they put all their eggs into one basket. You can actually design like a highly resilient infrastructure on Amazon itself if you use like multi-cloud, like maybe not fully censorship resistant, but resilient to a certain degree, right? But the fact that a lot of the exchanges go down till date tells you a lot of these guys don't really know or have the technical know-how to do a resilient infrastructure. And it's like, well, it's not their fault, they're just inexperienced, right? But uh, so that puts the onus on like the platform creators to make it simple. So the problem is like, yes, right now it's not decentralized fully, but will it be decentralized? Yes. And what is the trigger? It's not going to be ideology, we know that. Like, people don't care about values as much as you and I think they should care about values. I think it'll come down to user experience and collaborative features on top, right? Um, so yeah, so people are starting to realize they can put the API nodes and RPC nodes and all that on Akash. It's actually cheaper, way better than Amazon, but front ends and whatnot is not better than Netlify or any other like Amazon PaaS services, because they had years to optimize the user experience, and these platforms have not yet. And it's, I don't mean to sound ranty, but I think the problem is, as much as it's on the DeFi projects, it's also on us as platform creators to not make it simple for them to use. But I think that's going to change.
Yeah, and I think there's two things to it that you said, which are super important. The first one is basically that I think one of the reasons for that clusterfuck, like you said earlier, what we have right now is that most people simply don't care enough, right? Because, like I said, it works. Why should I change anything? Why do we need to decentralize anything? Because, we can trust Amazon. So far, there hasn't been a major thing that happened. Especially for the non-crypto native people, I think they still blindly rely on that. And to a certain extent, we also do, right? Still nowadays, because the decentralized infrastructure, maybe with the launch of Bitcoin in 2008, with this whole movement, I think it's still very early. I think there's still a lot of challenges. And obviously we have disadvantages in performance up until now. But I think this is shifting right now. So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing I think is that within the crypto community, within the kind of like decentralization movement, we have all this chain maximalism, right? Like you were pointing out, these guys don't even want to talk to other projects because they think, or they want to maintain that control and that ownership that they have. But I think it requires a lot more, and every single element needs to be decentralized, right? From the underlying infrastructure to I don't know, to every single industry that runs on top of it. So I think this is very important to understand. But I think maybe we could see a major cyber attack or a major event, that would probably have a large effect for millions of people that are depending on Amazon or on Google or on Alibaba and all these kind of centralized platforms. So I think that's really, really important to understand, and also to maybe dig a bit deeper into that. But let's move a little bit on to kind of like, Akash specific topics. And also this show is obviously called Cosmos, This Week in Cosmos, right? So we're all cosmonauts and full-time Cosmos fanboys. Can you give a little bit of a context, like the origin story, right? Like, when did you guys meet up? How did you also get in touch with the Cosmos community? I know Jack, who I interviewed on my channel a couple of times as well, has also been in touch with you early. Can you talk a little bit about the origin story, how Akash and Cosmos came together, why you chose to build on Cosmos, and how it started in the early days?
Yeah, it was very organic. I think first interaction I had with Jay Kwan, and not Ethan, but Jay Kwan, was we had a copyright. Akash was called Photon before when we began, actually. So they were launching a Photon token, and we were like, shit, man, we had this whole project and we spent money on like branding and whatnot. Can you give us and he was like reluctant to give us the name. So that was like first interaction. I think it was in 2006 something. And then we were actually building out. So we were in 2017. We were building out the prototype, right, for this marketplace, and we were, Ethereum was the only platform. So when you're building something, especially at the prototype stage, you don't want to invest a lot of energy. You want quick iteration. You want to be able to like build something quickly and show it to people to demonstrate, right? So we built it on Ethereum, and then we were demonstrating. We were like doing research and whatnot, and CryptoKitties launched in 2017, I believe. That took down 40,000 users on Ethereum, took down the entire network. And that was a moment of realization for us, like we're not going to build a scalable cloud solution that people use on a Ethereum blockchain. It's not going to happen, right? And now it's obviously more evident that you have to pay hundreds of dollars to just do any transaction, let alone doing something like a blog deploy, and then you have to pay like $100 every time you update your blog. So that's not going to work for us, right? And we were like in the market, and a friend introduced us to Tendermint. They were like, well, look, if you're going to go build a blockchain, you can go shared system, and there was no other viable shared security system back then. The only way, the best possible way is to maintain sovereignty, right? With sovereignty, you have economic sovereignty, you have scalability sovereignty, you have a lot of tools, and we're distributed systems engineers, and so we love sovereignty, right? But we are also trying to like balance out. Well, sovereignty also means it's expensive to launch a blockchain. You got to get all the validators and all that stuff. Um, and we were like sold on proof of stake, already in 2011, sorry, 2017, and Tendermint was a Golang library, so we were very very heavy Golang. If you look at my GitHub profile, you'll see I have over, I don't know, thousands of stars on GitHub personal projects. All of them are Golang. Company, we are all Golang. So for us to look at a Golang project and be like, oh, this is something we can adopt, because for us it's very important that we can fix things, right? Because we know writing software is nothing is perfect, and you're always going to have bugs. And we judge our criteria as like, can we go, if there's a bug, can we go actually fix a bug, right? So in that vein, Tendermint seemed to be very viable, like uh, primitive to build a blockchain. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles on top like you needed, but it has this modular design that was very fascinating for us, because now we can end up building all the modules, like banking module, like staking module, like governance module, all these like features that you can build. So it was like a Ruby on Rails, if you know what that is. It's programming framework to easily like build websites. It was like a Ruby on Rails equivalent for blockchains. It was very attractive for us, and so that's how we started like talking. But we never really like approached the team. We had some introduction somewhere, but we never really like sort of like you know cared about talking to Cosmos team, because this is an open source project and it's a Golang project. We know how to use Go. We didn't need a lot of help, right? Until like 2019, after we built out a prototype, we had a lot of problems with Tendermint. It was not stable. It was very like early version as expected, right? But we liked the fact that the team was working a lot. The Tendermint team and the Cosmos teams, where we could see the GitHubs, we could see the effort, we could see the progress, and we could fix our bugs. We started contributing a lot back to Tendermint, improving Tendermint. And so we launched our testnet in 2019, and that's when we interact. I think Jack was the first person to see this, and he was blown away. He was like, holy shit, you put cloud Kubernetes on Tendermint. And it was always like a pipe dream for a lot of the guys at Tendermint to do something like Akash. And he started like advising us, and he worked with us very briefly for a little bit. He also invested at that time, I think 2019. It was bear market, right? Like deep bear market. So we were like from the 20, and then Cosmos came about with version 1. So Cosmos made Tendermint easy to use, because now you can essentially, all the modules that we were building ourselves, Cosmos had those modules already built. So we threw away 200,000 lines of code. I still have this famous tweet from somewhere. I was like deleting like one time and deleted 70,000 lines of code. the less code we write, the better for stability. I know people love more code and more commits in blockchain. We look at less code. We look at stability and counter to the popular, like, oh, more code better. No, it's not, right? It's almost never the case. So we always want shared code because shared code has public scrutiny, and shared code is always it has probably went through multiple rounds of like auditing and whatnot. It's always better to have code that's used by multiple people than your own company, because it has more eyes looked at it, right? And more and more people can solve the problem in case you get stuck. So we're a big fan of shared code, not shared security, and that's where a crux of Cosmos comes into play, because it's a completely unique model that allows for sovereignty and it has shared code, right? That means more eyes, but gives you and doesn't have shared security, which is fine. That means only top quality projects actually can launch, because it's not easy to launch on Cosmos, right? So I think overall, because it's hard to use, harder than Ethereum for sure, and harder than any shared security systems for sure, that has a high filter and high quality bar for Cosmos projects. And it's beautiful now because now you have composability with IBC, right? So now you have top tier projects that all have composability, and you don't see scams or things like you see in other blockchains, right? I don't want to name exact which ones, but and the reason for that is like it's not easy to launch a Cosmos blockchain. If you do launch, you have entire validator ecosystem that's supporting you, and and you have this ecosystem sort of effect where other players can other strong players always have a way, they find a way to work with you, right? Like an IBC is just opening up that can that was closed for so long. I think it's just going to be a game changer. Like, and the kinds of things people are building is already evident, right? So we have strong builders in Cosmos, which makes the community extremely attractive for something like Akash. And a lot of these guys are also our customers, our users, right? Like now we recently launched Cosmos Omnibus. The goal of Omnibus is to make launching a test net. You know how I said it's very hard to launch a Cosmos project, and a lot of that is like, well, how do you launch a test net, and how do you make it easy for your participants, your ecosystem, players to launch their own test nets, right? Like you have all these like complicated things that makes involvement harder. We're trying to make that as simple as possible. And like I said, like and to answer your question, like, well, why most of the nodes are on Ethereum or Ethereum nodes are on Amazon? Because it's harder to do non-Amazon. So I think attacking the problem where the problem is, which is easy to use, and we're going from an ecosystem approach. We're going to start off with Cosmos first, and then we're going to spread to other ecosystems, because the problem is very evident, right? So we are helping bootstrap security much simpler, and cost effective. Like Akash, as you know, right now the prices are like 1/3 Amazon. So you'll be stupid not to at least try Akash, right? Because unless you don't like money, which is fine, which I guess, right? So it's 1/3 cheaper, and if I make it extremely fast and easy to launch a blockchain on Akash, I think we in the market. So why Cosmos is that, yeah, they're just technically superior, and you have high quality projects, and they actually ship and align with us when it comes to sovereignty over shared security.
Okay, so now I'd like to dive deeper into the Akash ecosystem. And in that sense, I think our listeners would love to know how they can actually earn money with Akash. And maybe you could also touch a little bit on the Supermini, what it is, how it works, and why you brought it to the market in the first place.
Right. So how you can earn money on Akash, right? So first and the most direct way to earn money on Akash is to become a provider. Sorry. Let me put this on do not disturb. The first and most obvious way you make money is to provide services, computation services. Akash is a marketplace, so anyone with a unused computer, essentially, I mean, ideally a data center computer, right, can host their work, can provide the compute and earn income. And the second way to earn income is to stake Akash, right? So Akash, as you know, is a proof of stake. token and Akash token, and the token is used to secure the blockchain. And you have an incentive for you to secure the blockchain, and that incentive comes through inflation rewards. So that's one way. And a third way to earn money using Akash is to provide liquidity. Either now we have Gravity Dex, and it's very attractive to provide liquidity for Akash pairs, and the I think APRs are in like 3 digits now, which is crazy. I don't know how long they're going to last. I mean, obviously on a decay curve, and obviously more people participate, the lower the incentives get. But that's another way. And a fourth way is to, well, providing liquidity. You also earn fees from swaps, right? From trading essentially. Um, and well, so the first way I said is to become a provider, and that's where Supermini comes into play. Supermini is essentially a provider running from the comfort of your house. The goal of Supermini when we launch is the fact that we um, are going to you know um, enable a cloud in the home, right? So as you know, I was about my rant about cloud being in a data center, and like Akash was designed to be hyper versatile. That means you can run anywhere, and Supermini is a testament to the hyper versatility, right? So the idea was like, well, you can, how about like bring, instead of cloud, you go into the cloud, bring the cloud to you, so you can host all your data locally in your home. You can use the thing to run VPN servers. You can use the thing to do so many things that you don't have to leave the comfort of your home, right? So that's important for privacy. That's important for cost. Important for a lot of things, right? And the biggest cost in a data center is not the power that is spent to you know power your computer. It's the power spent to cool, right? So if you're in the home, you already have cooling. That's where you live, right? Hopefully. And then you know you can reuse that cooling to cool Supermini. So a lot of advantages economically. The cost is super low when you have a server running in the home. But disadvantages like, well, you don't have viable internet, right? So you don't have too much scalability because there's a limit as to how many Superminis you can put. The more you get, you'll probably get cut off from the power company, right? So so but if we can create a GPU infrastructure that's spread across the world, and create a mechanism for people that wants these compute clusters at a lower cost, and the economics will play out. So it's very experimental in the sense that, well, so if you can't like host so most you know application, most websites need very strong internet connection to be hosted from a computer, right? So now when you don't have strong internet connection, what can you host? You can host machine learning. You don't need strong internet connection, right? But you need a lot of compute, GPU. So the idea is to have that the machine learning, you put it in a computer, it becomes a supercomputer. I mean, you put GPUs in a to serve machine learning, right? So the goal was like, well, can we do like machine learning workloads on the Supermini, and we'll initially only set out 300 units to experiment with it. If the economics work out, then we'll expand. But more and more, we're feeling like it's more of a distraction from our core value, because it's giving out a wrong message that Supermini is centralizing Akash, which I guess has value. It has legs to it because Supermini is managed by a company, right? If you're not managing it, someone else is managing it for you. That's a centralized risk right there. And second thing is we still need GPU capabilities on Akash. We don't have that yet. GPU is one of the most exciting things for us because the problem is rampant for machine learning. And so Supermini will become a reality when Akash enables GPU, which is in the next few months, essentially. So it's a beautifully designed, and unfortunately the hype overshadows the utility of the network and the device. So unfortunately we designed this really beautiful, and we sold out the pre-sales um, in like 2 weeks, and then we have about 60,000 people in the wait list now. And the device was supposed to be $1,000 device, and we had offers. People are paying half a Bitcoin for it. Like they want this device. I don't know what's appealing. It's just they want this as a beautiful piece in their home more than its utility. I think there's a lot of art value to it right now, more than actual utility value that's being quantified in cash. So
Yeah, Yuri and I are also whitelisted, I think, and Fabi as well.
Yeah.
I have so many friends
Yeah.
that are like whitelisted for that. So, long
Yeah.
story short, I think it's becoming more distraction, and it's taking away a lot of the conversation about Akash. I can't tell you how many emails I get every day asking people to bump weird things people offer, like all kinds of things. There's a lot of YouTube people talking about it. We have nothing to do with them. Like somebody, they're making all these false like claims. I'm going to like actually write a blog post to debunk a lot of these claims, right? People are taking the screenshot from the Supermini and literally putting graphs like how much this would be worth. I've seen all kinds of weird things. Um, so yeah, so it's becoming more of a distraction.
Yeah, but still, it brought a lot of attention to your project, which is also quite good. So you can say it was also a little bit like a good for marketing as well, because many people fell in love with Akash because of this. And yeah, I mean the device looks pretty damn good and pretty cool. So maybe you should make an NFT out of it. But there's one thing for me that represents so much for me, like the Supermini, but also the stakeable characteristics of the AKT token. I have this kind of feeling that we are entering a new era of financial assets. Um, I have I have this theory of an ultra efficient financial asset class, which are stakeable assets such as AKT. And I think in a world where everything is getting more digital and where things are getting more dependent on AI and where people try to find a job somehow, that stakeable assets can provide like a real passive income for these people, yeah, to still get money somehow. So what is your take on that we are entering this kind of era where people can make money on their assets way more efficiently?
Correct. Yes, making money is one part, but I think getting involvement, which is the most exciting thing, is another, right? Getting people a sense of ownership gives them a sense of responsibility to use your product and also to, uh, you know, to spread the word, right? So I think it's super important staking as a feature, right? So for Akash, we didn't originally intend or think about some of the things that we got right now from staking. Um, like the original intent for Akash design when we did staking, especially Akash introduced high APR staking, right? Like a lot of the projects were very minimal APR before Akash, and it didn't make sense for a lot of them financially from the incentives. They were very misaligned. So our idea was like, look, um, we want cloud to be owned by the people. So a proof of stake represents each token represents one vote, right? Essentially, um, and people should govern their networks. People should innovate, and people should make decisions as to what they want from the cloud. The only way to get them to secure is to stake, to secure the blockchain by staking, right? The more stake there is, the more security the blockchain has. Now, what are the incentives for people to stake? Well, you don't have meaningful revenue because it's a young network. You're gonna, it's gonna take a while before we can see Amazon scale, like exponential scale, right? And we don't have the revenue. We have some about 600 AKT total in revenue, network revenue. It's something. It's better than nothing. It's better than Cardano, I suppose. But anyway, um, the it doesn't have the meaningful revenue for someone to take extraction. Like so, Akash's model is like we'll take a take income. That means a portion of the fee, similar to Uniswap, similar to other that the fees goes to like the stakers as an incentive to stake. So in the early days when we don't have meaningful income, meaningful take model, we'll use inflation, and it's not a new idea. So inflation says new money supply to subsidize some of the bootstrapping that we need to for security, right? It's not a new idea. I mean, we have done bootstrapping based on new money supply years. I mean, like U.S. government does that. several scenarios, subsidizing corn industries, subsidizing India, subsidizing textile industries. They're just some classic examples from economics of the past, right? So we used those ideas, but we made it more trackable and more auditable and transparent, essentially. So and the of course the inflation can be runaway, right? It can be just open-ended. So we wanted to the value of the token, part of the value of the token comes from the scarcity of the token. So there's a maximum supply of 389 million tokens Akash will ever have. And we began with 100 million tokens, and then with a high percentage APR that translates to about 54% in staking rewards. That's on a decay curve that reduces every block period, a small amount every block period. And by the time by the time the becomes less meaningless, the staking rewards or the inflation rewards, the network revenue will catch up, and you'll get income from the network revenue. So that gives us good time, like a few years. By the time we need to have meaningful income that'll replace the staking income. So the beauty of it is now that people have so many engineers that once they discover staking, they end up using fall in love with the product, of course, right? They end up having more skin in the game for them to spread the word. Like, so we have so many people, big billionaires to like like front-end developers, all kinds of people staking Akash now. They have an incentive to go represent Akash in their organizations, and so we get a lot of adoption that way, right? So the social effects of staking, the financial effects are great. Like, sure, again, not financial advice. It's high risk, right? You're still exposed to Akash. Akash price is volatile. It has so many macro effects. A lot of highly risky asset, right? But the point is, the consistent like reward that Akash gives you, it's so attractive. So people can just hold on to this and stake and forget. You don't need to like check your price every day, right? Because you always have that like, well, there's more tokens that are coming, right? So I think the inherent token design is protected us really well for shocks that Bitcoin gives you, and puts us in a pathway like of, well, there is a revenue that's growing on Akash Network every day. So if you do the math, if you take our growth curve and and take the decay curve of staking, there will come a point in the future where the network revenue exceeds staking revenue, right? So till then, it's a comfortable hold, and so users have like, it's fully transparent, right? There's nothing we can hide, and it's all blockchain, right? Even our dashboard is not built by us. It's Akash Analytics. It's some built by a community member. They've established what they're tracking, and I actually look at that every day when I wake up and every day when I sleep, and that becomes a guiding sort of like dashboard. It's so much driven by the community. It's amazing. It's yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really good points, and also mindful game theory to incentivize users to not just start using or also creating potentially organic demand for the token, but also use the product and retain and stick to the product, right, in the long run. So I think that's a major part for the entire crypto industry, basically. The last question we have, or I have, but definitely not the least important, is the partnership landscape, right? So I think we can stick to two, and then maybe you can expand from there. Osmosis, which is a Cosmos kind of like native crypto project that just launched 3 weeks ago, something like that. Made big waves with their amazing UI and UX, and more than 100 million total value locked within 2 weeks or something. So can you talk through what Akash and Osmosis have to do with each other? And also Solana, right? I've seen you guys also on Twitter. I'm an avid Twitter follower of yours, by the way, and big fan. Solana, you also have a partnership with them. Please talk through those two partners, and also what is maybe in the pipeline. Is there something coming up that you are most excited about?
Yeah. So both partnerships are very organic. Both Solana founders and Osmosis founders are very dear friends of mine that we go way back. The Osmosis was more, well, Sunny Agrawal, who was at Tendermint, for a while. He's an advisor to Akash as well, and very early investor in Akash. And it was obvious for him, like he's not going to use a centralized infrastructure to run Osmosis, right? Part of Osmosis is still the web UI is still run under Netlify, because Netlify is an easy to use tool for teams that are very remote, and it has beautiful features, right? It's one of those things that I recommend early projects to optimize for iteration speed. Don't optimize for anything else, because you're a young team. You need to ship fast. Like you don't want to like put yourself in a high friction environment. For UI, Netlify, Vercel, there are other tools, but for backends, for RPC servers and your REST servers with heavy nodes is where Akash is used. So Akash is doing the heavy lifting, the backend services, and a lot of the nodes for Osmosis are run on Akash. And there is a provider called Censorship-resistant, a validator. I really like them because they run a lot of the workloads on Akash themselves. They run a lot of nodes on Akash themselves. I believe they even run an Akash validator on Akash, so it gets really meta there. So I always wonder what happens if Akash goes down. Anyway, Akash will never go down because it's decentralized. I mean, at least the blockchain piece. It gets very, very interesting when you do Akash nodes on Akash itself, right? Anyway, so Chandra Station is doing a lot of that, and it's also for them. It's like, hey, look, Chandra Station is a validator, as a company. For them, cost is very, very important. And them getting advantage over the rest of the validators, offering 1/3 the cost means they can offer lower commissions, ultimately passed on to the stakers. So that's how you look at like why it's important to use lower cost cloud that is high performance, right? And how that savings can get passed on. Chandra Station is crushing it, right? I mean, they started off like no one. They're like top Akash validator now, top Osmosis validator now, and they run a lot of pocket miners on Akash, a lot of Monero miners on Akash. They're loving it, right? So Osmosis is definitely using Akash for heavy lifting, and several areas running nodes, running RPC servers, API servers, and all that cool stuff. And eventually they will start running their front end UI itself on Akash. We're looking at maybe using Skynet for doing some of the heavy lifting for CDNs, for hosting static assets. But anyway, they should be using decentralized cloud. For Solana, we do have some nodes running on Solana. So Solana history, I was the first person to introduce Solana on stage, interview Anatoly on stage. If you go to Solana's YouTube, you'll see an interview. You won't see my face there because it's super dark, but you can hear my voice and you can see my name on the thing. I interviewed Anatoly for the first time on stage ever. So that was fun. And I think you can see Raj in the background somewhere there. And Solana, their biggest challenge right now is decentralization. So they're running about 1,000+ nodes, I believe, Solana network, and they want to get to 10,000 nodes. For them, cost, because these nodes are very, very expensive. For them, cost is very important. We are not fully feature complete for Solana because we don't have GPUs yet. Solana runs amazingly well on GPUs. So right now, some of the validators that are running some testnets on Akash, but not a fully production node because of our lack of GPU ability. As soon as that gets resolved in very, very shortly, Solana, a majority of the workloads will be running on Akash. So we're working very, very closely with Solana. And a lot of the Serum, I believe there's a Serum UI running on Akash. Some of the Solana ecosystem projects are using Akash as well. So to answer your question, yes, the goal for Solana and Akash partnership is to decentralize Solana much further by reducing the cost of node infrastructure. And 1/3 is amazing cost reduction, right? And hopefully help them to scale to about 10,000 validators from a 1,000 validator set right now. So a lot of work ahead of us for Solana.
Yeah, that sounds very, very great. And for me, it's always awesome to see how small the crypto ecosystem sometimes is, because we are growing at an insane speed right now. Developments are taking place so fast right now, and apparently everything comes together at one point. So I find it very interesting that even Solana and Osmosis, that all of this comes together here, and I think that also speaks a lot for decentralization and interoperability long term. So I find that this is an aspect which makes me very bullish on DeFi and on interoperability long term. Nonetheless, the video is getting longer, and yeah, our time is also somehow limited. It was such a pleasure to talk with you. As we can see, you have a lot of experience in the computer science space, but also in the crypto industry. So it was awesome that you shared your thoughts with us. And yeah, it was a pleasure for us that you took the time for us. And yeah, we hope to see you soon on the show again.
Absolutely. This was absolute pleasure as well. Thank you for having me.